Hey there. Have you ever really... Why you gotta laugh every time I start? Oh, it's distracting. Anyways, has it ever been really hard for you to make a decision? Like, have you ever dealt with a lot of indecision in your life and you don't know what to do? You have all these plans, all these ideas. They all seem really good, but you're not quite sure what's going to work better than others, and then you get bogged down with it all. Well, if that's you and that's something that you're dealing with, let's talk about this in this Get Naked Monday. Here we go. Hello, and welcome to thoughtraid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon, and this is Tim, and today is Get Naked Monday, where we metaphorically get Monday.
We get Monday. Welcome to Get Naked, or Get Monday Naked.
Get Monday Naked, where we metaphorically get Monday, Anyways, metaphorically get naked and talk about what's going on in our personal lives and how we're handling it. And like I was talking about in the beginning, today we're going to be focusing on indecision and navigating that when you've got all of these different types of plans, ideas, stuff that's on your mind that you want to do, but you're not sure which one to take or do, and it will even work, all that kind of stuff. This is something that's been heavily on your mind specifically, Tim, so I want to throw this over to you. And what have you been going through? What have you been processing through?
Well, I guess it's just more of a thought than something I've actually been going through. I mean, there are things that I want to keep personal and not on air, but
Of course.
I was just thinking about making decisions as an adult. Like there's so many decisions that we're tasked to make, and I think some of the bigger decisions I've made: buying a house, getting married, choosing professions. Some decisions are harder to make than others, and some of you might be going through similar things. Like you might be on the precipice of ending or beginning a new job, or you might be in a relationship that needs to end, or on the cusp of a relationship that might begin. And choosing to follow through and actually make that change, it's fun to think about, but actually committing to doing it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking about being a kid back in the day, and making decisions as a child was a lot. Well, I don't want to say it was easier, because back then my worldview was a lot smaller. Like when you guys were children, or when we were children, we had to make certain decisions, like where we were going to sit during lunchtime, whether or not we were going to do our homework. I remember whenever we were in class, the teacher would ask a question, and I would know the answer, and I'd want to answer it, but I was very self-conscious about what people thought about me. So I was like, should I raise my hand or not? And those were like big decisions back in the day. And I guess the gravity of the decisions weren't as large or majestic as they are now, because a lot of decisions were already made for me, like where I was living, what school I was going to.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, like I remember there were a lot of things that I didn't like about my life, but there were a lot of things I did like. Like I've always had two parents.
That's always good.
I've had a mom and a dad, and they were my legitimate biological mom and dad.
Some people don't have that.
Yeah, and overall they were good parents. And I was in school. I never had to worry about food. So the idea that some of you have been working through a lot more difficult things than I have, but I never had to decide, am I going to steal food? Am I going to steal this? Do I need to steal stuff? My parents always gave me stuff, I always had the latest, greatest game system. I always had clothes, even though they weren't the clothes that I always wanted. Like I don't know if you guys felt this, but in school, the big thing was Abercrombie and Fitch, or Quicksilver, or do you remember the No Fear shirts?
No, I do not.
Oh, they were so cool.
I'm so sorry. I also just realized that my microphone has been muted until now, but it's been fixed. You can hear me now properly.
It's better that way anyways.
Wow. My voice carries anyways.
Yeah. But just thinking about how decisions were made for me as a kid, it was a lot easier to make the smaller decisions because the weighty ones weren't really on my shoulders. For instance, if my parents needed a new car, my thought process was, okay, my parents are going to figure it out. I didn't have to figure out where the finances were going to come from. I didn't have to figure out the stress. I didn't have to worry about going to work. My expectations were go to school, wake up, do my homework. My parents said, get in the car, we're going to Duke Energy to pay the light bill, or hey, we're going on vacation. Okay, I just tagged along. Like, there were very few decisions that I actually had to make. Well, decisions that included other people or something that fulfilled my purpose or whatever, you know. And I guess it was like that for you too. Like, there was a lot of stuff that was already predetermined and established as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, especially being an only child, I didn't have many options growing up. Also, by the way, in case it wasn't heard well when we started, we're talking about indecision, and just kind of navigating that when you have a whole bunch of ideas and things that you want to do, but not sure which path to take and if it will even be effective. That's the main thing that we're going over today, because I just recognized again that my mic was muted, so we'll make sure that's clear. But other than that, I mean, yes, there was a lot of things I couldn't do growing up. I didn't have the decision on because I didn't drive. I was an only child. I didn't have like some older sibling to take me places when I got older, or before I was older, before I had my own license. So like there was none of that. And you know, a lot of my parents' hopes and dreams rested on my shoulders. So they raised me a specific way. It wasn't controlling, but you know, there was still a lot of pressure to do things specifically. And so when it came, even when it came to graduating and deciding what direction I wanted to head on, there was regular, you know, pushback of like the school that I was going through was unaccredited, and so they wanted me to go to an accredited college, so more options would be open to me. But even before that point, though, just it wasn't. My options were straightforward. I'm going to have to get a job. I'm going to have to do volunteer before I can get a job, because I did volunteer work when I was like 12, 13. I started with like babysitting my cousins. But then, you know, other things were taken care of for me. You know, I had a roof over my house. I had both parents. I also had the latest video games typically, so it wasn't hard, but it, you know, also there just wasn't that same risk. Everything was a little more linear, up until, you know, especially up until I moved out. Yeah. Then things became much less linear.
Yeah. Just making sure I'm not muting myself. Guys, we're working on our microphones. We, luckily, through all of your support and donations, we were able to buy a second microphone. So if there's reverb, we're trying to figure it out. So we're just going back and forth trying to mute.
Maybe that's something I should do, is when I'm talking, I unmute, and when I'm not talking, I mute.
Yeah, so if you guys are watching right now, it'd be nice to know how we sound.
Please let us know. Are you hearing the echo going on, or is there no echo? We're doing our best to kind of reduce that by being closer to the microphone as well, and just various different things until we get to a place where we can actually have like analog microphones and like a soundboard thing that could help with simultaneous hearing us.
Yeah, so for the time being now, I guess we're trying to alternate muting our mics.
Yeah.
It'll have to be a practice, but
yeah.
Anyways, we're talking about making decisions as a child, and I think, you know, sometimes I think about how much I want to go back to that. It'd be so much nicer to be a child, just because it just seemed like life was a lot more simplistic, you know. The thing about being an adult, like I remember being a freshman and thinking about getting my license and how that was going to open up several doors, because that would have opened up many decisions on where I could go. Like, Tim, do you want to get a job? Where do you want to work? Do you want to go to the mall and like look for girls, or do you want to go shopping? Do you want to be able to go to different social events? Do you want to just go to a park and, you know, do you want to go buy a guitar? Like, there were so many options that opened up to me when I got a license. But there was also a lot of responsibility that came with that. But we're not talking about responsibility. We're talking about decisions today. But as you grow up and you become an adult, there are more and more decisions you have to make, you know, and there are so many posts on social media that I see from people my age and younger, and they talk about adulting and how adulting sucks. And I'm just thinking about that. Like, does adulting actually suck? Because, you know, in the past 10 years, I've gained a wife, I've gained a house, I've gone through 2 cars. I've taken over my own finances. I've changed jobs 2 or 3 times. There's a lot of things that I had to make the decision to change. And if I didn't make that decision myself, something was going to make the decision for me. And just the idea of making decisions as an adult, it can be overwhelming because there's so many places you can go. You know, if I was a child and I didn't like where I lived, which I had a lot of issues with where I lived because I got teased about my conditions of living, and they weren't bad at all. But I couldn't make those decisions. I remember one time I got upset with my dad because I was like, Dad, you know, we don't even have a deck. We should do this. We should do that. We should do that. And he got frustrated with me, as obviously any dad would. And he took all the money out of his pocket and, you know, was like, here, take all the money. You do it. Because I wasn't looking at it from his perspective. I didn't see all the pressures and all the difficulties that were weighing on him, you know. And I was very selfish because I was just thinking, okay, well, I don't have to make the decision. I just have to convey a want. And now if I have a want, I have to make the decisions to support it, you know. We got our stimulus check and we decided, oh, we actually want to start doing something with our house because there's a minimum savings amount that we've been pursuing, and we finally hit that after a while. And so we felt freedom to, well, spend money on superfluous things. And so we redid our deck and we made that decision. We bought some patio furniture. We made that decision. And now we're reaping the rewards of it. Like every morning we get to go out there and hang out and enjoy our coffee on our porch, #adult, right? But that was a decision that we had to make. And there was a lot of, I don't want to say trepidation, but there was a lot of thought that went into it and intentionality. Like we've come to the conclusion that we don't want to spend, if we're going to spend more than $100 on something, we have to sit on the idea for at least a day, 24 hours. And that was just a boundary. And I think that's really important, making a decision as an adult, because there, as I mentioned, there are so many ways you could go with things. And talking about the dating world, there are so many opportunities out there for anybody.
That's a place where you would probably deal with a lot of indecision because of just how important of a decision it should be. Because, you know, you want to not be in a relationship just for the sake of it. You don't want to just play around with a person. You want to have someone you can keep in your life for the rest of your life, you know, till death do you part. You know, and so that's one of probably the biggest areas where someone could probably struggle with indecision, especially if they've been through a lot of hurt in the past or have low self-esteem. I feel like that area would be a big area of struggle. Also, jobs. I know for me, if there's an area that I've struggled when it comes to indecision, it can be jobs, because like trying to find that job that hits my skills but also takes care of the bills, in some kind of way that fits all those kind of things plus more. It can be hard to make a decision on what job I specifically want to do, because that's a commitment. Making the decision to continue to focus on this is a whole another thing that I have to deal with. What I want to do. Do we want to take a day off because today was a little bit stressful? No. Stuff of that nature.
Brandon, that's another thing. And guys, if you are self-employed, my hat is off to you, because it's so much easier just to punch a clock and once again have somebody tell me what to do and what my expectations are. Because when I worked at GameStop, and even though I was a manager and I led a store, and I was a mentor to some degree to other stores in different ways, because my store was always high performing. And I wasn't amazing. There are certain things that I did well, and honestly, I had Jesus on my side, and he's the reason why I flourished in so many different ways. But there were still expectations. I still had a conference call. I still had a boss who said, this is where we're going. Somebody that cast vision, because my boss had a boss, and his boss had a boss, and that boss had a company council and shareholders and stockholders and stuff. And they were like, this is the direction we're going. So I can make decisions within a confined environment. But being self-employed is much more difficult because you still have to make those same decisions, but you also have to come up with a plan, and you have to refocus and refocus and refocus. I was talking to Dave Martin the other day about goal setting and achievement, and he said that a lot of times you can get lost in the minutia of life, lost in all the different serendipities and side roads and tangents. And when you are lost, you have to go back to the last place you saw clearly. And he was talking about leaning your ladder up against a building. Like sometimes you'll start climbing that ladder and you realize, ooh, I'm climbing up the wrong side. And a lot of people think to themselves, well, I've come this far, I need to keep going even if it's the wrong direction. Hence why we have toxic relationships, toxic work environments. A lot of us get into a work habit where we're employed by a company and we hate it, and we hate our job, we hate our people. We're more and more frustrated every day. We loathe it, but we do it because we idolize the money that we get from it and the opportunities. But making the decision to change something is really difficult because there's any number of things as an adult that you can do. You know, I could, like when I quit my job, I could have done any number of things. I could have just gotten a different job. I could have, just through COVID, I could have received unemployment. That was a decision I had to choose not to make, you know. But there's always that weird level of, what's the opposite of confidence?
Lack of confidence. It's insecurity.
Yeah, there was always a level of insecurity making decisions with stuff like this, because especially if you're leading something, like if you are a man in a relationship, and I'm not being sexist, I'm just saying the dynamic of our relationship is I lead in a lot of different areas, you know, and that's just because I have strengths, and Ariane really believes in me, you know. And so that's my role. And it's really difficult to have confidence making decisions in areas where I don't feel confident or where I know that I'm weak, because, man, I had a car repossessed when I was like 25 or 26, and here I am in a marriage, and I manage our finances. We have a house. I have a mortgage now, something I never thought that I would have. And it's like I have to make financial decisions. Like Ariane makes more money than me, but she came to me the other day and she said, hey, can I buy these scrubs? Because, you know, she wants a new pair of scrubs. And I had to think to myself, okay, well, if I'm leading this, I have to make a sound decision for my family, whether it pleases her or not. But I was like, go ahead and buy the scrubs, you know. But that's the difficult thing. It's like the things that I'm leading in my life. And I want to be careful saying things, because I don't want to call people things. You know, I'm talking about myself specifically, the different things in my life that I'm in charge of making decisions with. It's really hard to make a good decision as a people pleaser, because a lot of times making the right decision is not going to please people, especially yourself, you know. And we're talking about making decisions as an adult, and it's like, I know I should work out more. I know I should eat better. We watch an influencer on YouTube named Coach Greg, Coach G. And he's saying stuff about, well, you won't eat bad food if you don't bring bad food into your house. I mean, that makes sense, but that's a decision. You know, every time I go out and I get Chipotle, it's like good food. If I go out and I get what's that place? Cookout, it's like bad food.
I mean, yeah, if you don't bring it into your house, you won't eat it. But at the same time, the self-control required not to bring it in the first place is a whole nother story. And as I'm sitting here, what I'm thinking about, I think an important part of dealing with indecision is you got to be accountable. Without accountability, I think it's impossible to make really good decisions or to get past indecision. Because I'm just thinking about it, like, ultimately, I am accountable to God. So in this current state where I'm not living with my parents, and I'm on my own, you know, some of the things that keep me stable, that help me with decision making, is God literally told me. And if he didn't tell me, I don't know what I would be doing, because I'm in a place where I'm doing something I've never done before. And so that the decision making factor is, what was the last thing that God told me? And that helps me remain grounded in making a decision, even when new data comes up. Because I think I mentioned this in a previous thought raid, that there came a moment not too long ago like a couple weeks ago where it was presented to me a job offer for a jewelry store, a place where I had applied to several years back when I wasn't sure what was happening with the walking company. And so immediately I felt peace about this thing because, like, ooh, this is something that I can do. I know I'm skilled in sales. I've done sales for 8 years, and I have management skills. I could do this, and I had peace. And so that confused me at the same time because it's like, the thing that God had been telling me over and over is focus on ThoughtRaid. Focus full-time on ThoughtRaid. Nothing else. Nothing but ThoughtRaid. I'm like, okay. And why am I feeling peace then? Because, in the Christian world, peace is important. If you feel peace, that's oftentimes is God's way of leading you in a specific direction. Because there might be some big, scary things He may lead you towards. But if you have peace, you can tell that it's Him because there is no peace outside of God. There's anxiety and what if and thinking about tomorrow, And so when that decision came up, am I going to take on this job with the jewelry store? I had to go to God about it and I had to be accountable to Him, and see what did He have to say about it. And He essentially said, did I tell you to do it? And I was like, no, you didn't. He was like, okay, keep doing what you're doing. And that immediately gave me the decision to continue to focus full-time on ThoughtRaid. That settled right then and there. But it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't accountable to God. And there are so many other things, like, again, when you're younger, you're accountable to your parents. And so you may have desires and things you want to do, but they have the final say. When you become an adult and you move out, you're accountable at most to the government, I guess, in a loose way, as long as you're not doing anything, illegal, that's the highest accountability besides God, really, at that point, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, therein lies the problem, because this is a 3-part talk, and, we've talked about making decisions as a child and what that's like, and then we've talked about making a decision as an adult. And for my story, guys, I'm 36 now. I decided that I wanted to follow Jesus back when I was about 30-ish. I don't remember the exact age. And up until that point, I was making decisions that was based on where I wanted to go that made sense logically, and there is room for wisdom. There's room for making smart decisions. But the thing that gets me sometimes is faith. Because a lot of times in the Bible, it says that there is a way that seems right to a man. There are so many ways that seem right to us, especially when we're trying to make decisions. But it's really difficult when our emotions and how we feel get mixed in. I was talking to, once again, Dave Martin yesterday, and he said that we are a soul. We are not our thoughts, emotions, and our feelings. We are a soul. And so when those things hit us, whether you're thinking about, alcoholism, whether you're thinking about engaging in pornography, cheating on your spouse, if you're thinking volatile, hostile thoughts towards people, whatever the thought is, you are not those thoughts, you are not those feelings. Just because I feel like I need a bag of Doritos doesn't mean I need to say yes to it. Just because I want to swear at the person that just killed my character in League of Legends, it's like, which last night I got frustrated. I was like, F this, F that, because I was frustrated, but I'm not those feelings and I'm not those thoughts, but I allow them, because the Bible also says that it's not what goes into a man, it's what comes out, and walking with Jesus is a completely different beast, because there's a new form of authority that comes into my life that knows more than I do, so in my 20s, I learned that if I don't pay my bills, things get taken away. But if I have certain people in my life, they will pay for the debt instead of me. And then I discovered, okay, well, if I want to move out on my own and stop living off my parents at the age of 27, I need to do something about this. And so I was thinking, okay, I need X amount of dollars monthly. What's going to do that? Okay, a job. What job can I feasibly do? Okay, I can do this. And I started just lining up my goals with my actions, goals with actions, goals with actions.
I find it personally very interesting that you were able to make it to age 27 without having to think about a job, because my parents would not allow me to not have some sort of a job. Like I said, when I was like 13 or 14, I immediately started volunteering. They wanted me to volunteer. In fact, even before that point, I remember volunteering in the nursery at my church from as early as 7th grade. And then I babysitted my cousins as my first somewhat of a job when I was around 14. And then I got my first job when I was 16, and all throughout that time I was volunteering. So I volunteered in the nursery, I volunteered at other places out in the church. I think I helped with like distribution of food during like Thanksgiving special events, because our church would give away a full Thanksgiving meal to people who kind of couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. And I also was a junior volunteer at Forsyth Hospital for at least 3 years, I believe, starting with the kids. Then I think I worked with elderly, and then I ended up doing some audiovisual work, and that was fun. Going all the way back then, when I was volunteering at the hospital, there was just at the precipice when digital was surpassing analog, or what do you want to call it, I guess, paper.
And now we've come full circle.
Well, but it's interesting because, like, you know, they wanted to put all the files into the computer. Cool. And so the hospital, and I don't think they've demolished it. They probably just repurposed it, unless they still use it somehow. In deep within the basement of the hospital is this long 2-directional hallway that's not much wider than this room, with lines and lines of shelves with patients' like files in them. And I came in at the time as they were trying to transfer to digital, so like I had to go into this labyrinth of it's only 2-directional. Find the file.
This labyrinth.
It's huge. You could look and
labyrinth.
Yes, I mean labyrinth would suggest there's windings and turnings, but it's just 2-directional. But like it went on for a long distance. Labyrinth. That's a word, okay? Look it up.
Okay.
It's a word.
Well, anyways, getting back to the topic, it's not that I didn't have a job, because I worked from the age of 15 up until like 25. I had a really bad breakup. Well, on my side, it was really bad. I don't know about her side. And I was just emotionally messed up, man, and so for about a year or so, I didn't have a job. And that's when, bills piled up and all that stuff started happening. Because I'm 36 now, and last year I was 35, and I worked at GameStop for 12 years. So there's like less than a year that I didn't have a job. But just thinking about making decisions as an adult, it's the whole, I have a goal. How do I get there? Little actions to take consistently on my path to reaching that goal. But the thing about having a life with Jesus and living a life that's purposed bigger than yourself is that you're often called to do things and step into grounds that you can't make a goal for, because God says, I want you to do this, and gives you no details. And that's where the faith element comes into play. And yeah, Brandon's there now. But the faith element's really hard, because here the Bible says that my sheep hear my voice, the voice of another they shall not follow. But the thing is, God's voice often sounds like my voice, and my voice is often emotional and defensive and insecure about certain things. And so when God calls me to do something that doesn't make sense, I'm having to think to myself, okay, well, this thought, this idea, this direction, this decision that I need to make to get to some place, is it a smart idea based on what the world thinks and logically, and am I just being wise? Or am I overthinking it, and I really need to submit my decision to God and just say yes and follow in faith? Because I've made decisions that I thought were in faith, and they were just blunders because I was following my feelings thinking they were God. But at the same time, I have followed, the contrary, and it's also been a blunder. So it's like, I guess that's why grace is required to make decisions as an adult, especially an adult following Jesus, because you're not going to get it right
Yeah, putting yourself under unnecessary stress when it comes to decision-making time makes decision-making harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. I wrote a note down that said, when you're young, you have limited options, which causes you or creates an expectation for you to make smaller decisions. But when you're tasked with making bigger decisions, man, I remember when I was younger, I didn't want to do all these crazy things like be a fireman or a firefighter or an astronaut or whatever. I thought maybe I could be the president. I mean, that's still outlandish, I think, but or in some position of authority. Like,
that's a lot of decision making you have to do to be a president.
Yeah, you see,
and a lot of it people are not going to like.
Yeah, I always wanted to be the person to make decisions because I thought, well, early on, I was hurt a lot in my childhood. And so I was thinking from the position of, okay, well, if these are the decisions that hurt people, the opposite of that is decisions that are going to love people. That's what I was learning, you know? And I learned that through my 20s as well. And so me thinking, oh, you know, Tim is awesome. Tim has arrived. He's got a great perspective on everything. And I look back and I think I did have a good perspective. The execution had a little sprinkling of pride in there because I thought I was the ish. But making decisions from the position of authority, it seems awesome and it seems great. We all want that. I mean, look at the issue with cops right now. There are a lot of good cops out there, but there are a lot of bad cops too who are making decisions in authority that serve themselves instead of people. You know, and there are lots of great cops that make decisions out of authority to serve people instead of themselves. So it's both sides. But when you're in a position of authority, you have to always think about the greater good, regardless of who it's going to please or displease. I think Matt Peterson one time said that obedience costs other people more than it costs ourselves. So when we are obedient to what we need to do, it costs other people more because we're going to displease them. I think that's an interesting thought.
Well, at least it will cost them more if they're trying to control you. If they're not trying to control you, then it really doesn't make a difference for them, I think. But otherwise, if they are trying to control you, then they're just going to wear themselves out because, you know, there's no purpose. There's nothing good that comes out of trying to control someone's decisions and make them go down a specific path they don't want to go, even if it's a bad path, unless you are specifically their parent and guardian and they're living with you, you know. Besides that, and even then, you still need to allow room for failure. Like, failure is an important part, as long as it's not going to result in immediate death. You know, a failure is an important part of the growth process and learning. And to learn, like, I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm thinking about kids that grew up in helicopter families where they're just constantly under surveillance. And they can't make decisions because everything they do doesn't line up with what the agenda of the parent is. And like that probably doesn't if there's anyone who would probably struggle with indecision the most, it would be people that grow up in very controlling families.
Speaking on that real quick, looking back, because we've compared our childhoods and I've compared my childhood to other people that I'm close with now, and I actually had the ability to make some decisions, like when it came to things like am I going to engage in pornography, am I going to engage in premarital sex, am I going to engage in all these possibly destructive patterns. I remember my parents said before I was of adult age, they said, if you do this, I'm going to kick your butt. Right. I remember talking to my mom and I was like, hey, you should stop smoking cigarettes. And she's like, it's my prerogative. I'll do what I want. And I was like, well, what if I start smoking cigarettes? And she's like, I'm going to kick your butt. I was like, that's kind of a double standard, but okay. And I remember when I was older, I got caught looking at pornography and my parents were like, whatever, you know, you're of age. It's kind of weird. Actually, they didn't think it was kind of weird because they grew up with that stuff too. You know, in their household, it wasn't really a negative standard. It wasn't a healthy standard. I'll say that because I think that looking at pornography is unhealthy. That wasn't set for them. And so for me, they said, you have the choice to do this or not, whatever, as long as you're not hurting anybody. But the deceit there was I was actually hurting somebody. But I think if I ever have kids, I want to strive to give them as much choice as possible. But that's also a tough decision, because I'm thinking about how God leads me, because I'm his child. And there are always consequences for the decisions that you do make. Sometimes there are good consequences, sometimes there are bad consequences. It's like the idea that matter can't come from nothing. Right. There's always a trade-off, always an exchange.
Yeah, but like specifically, I think it would greatly depend from child to child how you would want to handle them, because each child is going to be a unique person. They might be more like you. They might be more like your wife. They may be some amalgamation of both. They may be more like their grandparents. They may be like no one you've ever seen before, and honestly, they're going to be. Even if they're twins, they're going to be different from each other. But I think there needs to be some agency for each child to make decisions that could potentially end in failure, as long as it doesn't end in immediate death.
Yeah, and just thinking about the ways I feel limited as an adult and the ways that I feel apprehensive about making certain decisions. If I were able to make certain decisions as a child, for instance, if I had gotten my license when I was 15 or 16 or whatever, and I had a car back then, and I can't go back and change it. I don't regret it. I think I learned a lot of good lessons. Like, I don't regret anything in my life. I lament the fact that certain things happened, but I am who I am today because of the things that have happened to me yesterday, But if I'd had a license back then and I was able to engage in more social interaction, or if my parents were more intentional about putting me in places where I could build understand social structure. That's something that Darius said when I interviewed him the other day. He said a lot of people are taught the action, the how, they can memorize, but they aren't taught social structures. And if I was put into a place where I could try, fail, and adjust to social structures, I could probably make a lot better decisions today, especially with friends and especially with my wife. Goodness, learning how to listen more instead of defend myself. That's still something that I struggle with. But yeah, I think starting early, allowing people to make enough decisions where they can engage in a consequence that will teach them, not through you ruling by an iron fist, but them discovering for themselves, this is good, this is bad. I think that's really important. I think that's also contrary to what a lot of Christians believe as far as following Jesus, because we're all sin-minded. We're all sin-focused. It's like, you can't put yourself in that position because you might be exposed to sin. Well, Jesus didn't say, he fled from it, but we have the Holy Spirit. We're above that. It is beneath us. We're supposed to claim dominion over this world, not run from it.
Or I've seen different approaches to the parenting styles. Like we had that one guy who came from Hawaii to talk about parenting and things you could do to protect the children, and all of the many layers he had set up with his Wi-Fi and everything to keep his children from accidentally stumbling upon pornography and all that kind of stuff. It's like, on one hand, you reduce the risk of them discovering something before they have the mental capacity to make a decision easily on whether it's good or not. On the other hand, I wonder, because there are things in my life that I just was convinced were wrong and never wanted to touch, because that's how I was raised. But I had to then, as I moved out, re-examine certain things, and a lot of things had to get re-examined. They had to be looked at. Is this God, or is this my parents? And I don't know necessarily, like, if you were to try to like do all these things to protect your children from making a bad decision, if that is or is not a good or bad thing. Because like they say that like your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until a specific age. Like I think it might not be completely fully developed until like 25 or something. I don't know. But like it goes through its major growth processes up until your 18th year or something of that nature. I'm not exactly sure of the statistics, but I do know that different parts of the brain continue to develop at different rates. And so theoretically you could say, well, if we can protect our children from encountering bad things, then they're more likely to make the right decision when they get older. Maybe, I guess. But at the same time, it may also make it harder for them to make decisions when they move out for themselves. It will increase with indecision.
And that's the thing, the whole confidence paradigm, you when that guy came from Hawaii and he was saying all these things about protecting your kids, I get the concept, but I fully disagreed with almost everything that he said, and I'm not saying that you should expose your children to pornography at all. I'm not saying that at all. But there's a level, and this irritates me a lot about Christian culture. There's a level of, and it's confusing once again, because as adults, you have to make decisions, and you're going to make the best decision possible based on what you've learned and experienced throughout your life. But I think one of the more important things to lean into faith as a decision, as a Christian adult, is learning that God is capable of leading even our children. And I'm not saying at all, put your kids in a place where they can view pornography, put them in a place where they can do drugs. No, not at all. I think what's most important is, for instance, my relationship with God. When I do something bad, there is an open forum for me to say, God, I've sinned. How do you feel about me? What do you think about this? What do you think I should do? Instead of God saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And that way, when I do that thing, I feel like I had to hide from him, just like Adam and Eve in the garden. Basically, God said, hey, I'm putting this thing here, this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I recommend you not do it. Don't touch it. That's the one thing that's off limits. And then they did it. Eve went over there and ate of the fruit, and Adam partook too. And then God comes in and they hide from him, and they don't think, oh, he's my loving father, I can tell him this and get guidance. They're like, no, I did something bad, I need to hide from him. Instead, it should be one of those situations where they have confidence to make a mistake and say, hey, I need to learn something from this. Like, every time I engage with Ariane and I do something stupid, or I say something dumb, or I'm not listening, I want to approach it from, hey, I'm throwing down all my defenses because I don't need to defend myself from you. My goal is to further my relationship with you. So my question should be, how do you feel about this? What are you thinking? How can I change? Right? But the moment I know that I've done something wrong, or the moment I feel not insecure, it's not offended, feel threatened, I'll crawl into my hole, because for almost my entire life, it's not been fruitful. In my formative years, it wasn't very fruitful for me to say, hey, I'm not going to defend myself. Here's the situation. During those years, I wish I could have said, hey, Dad, or hey, Mom, I've done this dumb thing. What's going on? And they say, okay, well, here's how you should think about this. This is healthy. And granted, that takes insane reasoning and insane patience for an adult. No, I don't think any adult aside from God is going to have that perfectly. But I think if we had that to support our decision-making process of, okay, failure is okay. You're going to fail. I'm going to put you in a place where it's possible, because there are consequences you need to learn from. And a lot of times we don't understand what consequences are, and we don't respect them for what they are, because we're too protected from them. Just thinking, if I had a 7-year-old that stumbled upon pornography, I'd much rather want them to, hey, Dad, I saw this. What do you think? Oh, well, here's what this is, A, B, C, sex is a thing. Well, this excited me, how should I feel about this? Can I look at this? No, I'd recommend not. And here's why. And here's why you need to have this boundary for yourself. Oh, okay. Instead of, don't you dare look at pornography. In fact, I'm afraid of it so much, I'm going to put up all these boundaries. And, it's a different dynamic. But is this making sense? Or am I just rambling?
No, I mean, it makes sense. And it'll probably be circumstantial, depending on the child. Because, there are some people that are my friends that I can just hit them hard and they take it, because that's how they are. They're stubborn, they're wild, whatever, but they can handle it because of their personality. There are other friends that I have that are super sensitive, can't do that same thing with them. Some friends that are super intellectual, and I have to reach out to them, their intellect, and some that are not necessarily dumb, but they're more whatever, just not as intellectual. They don't overthink things, and so they're able to just move through a lot of issues that an overthinker would otherwise get stuck in. So, depending on the child, I guess would depend on the actions that you would need to take. But I feel like having that agency would allow them to make decisions easier. But all that said, how do we overcome indecision? Because some of us have had more permissive parenting. Some of us have had more authoritative, parenting, where everything was laid out and this is what the decisions you're going to make. And there was a lot of structure to the point where you became too rigid. How do you move with indecision? Like, how do you overcome that?
Well, the answer is simple, Brandon. You just don't make a decision.
Wait.
Well, this is the big thing, like I remember when God told me that I should leave my job at GameStop and pursue being self-employed. I was like, yeah, God, that sounds like a great idea. I'll do it later when I feel equipped. And that at that moment, it's almost like God's anointing on me at GameStop lifted to a degree. Like I wasn't as prosperous as I was. The job started irritating me. I had less patience. And you could chalk that up to coincidence. I know fully it was God because I know what my conversations with him were like in the moment. But when you're being indecisive, I think what I run away from when I'm being indecisive is making a poor decision, and it's different for me now. It's different for me than it is for you and for some of you guys as well, because, well, I'm married, and that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. It's just when I make a decision now, not only am I concerned about how it's going to influence me, because if it was just me, oh, okay, well, I made a bad decision. I lost $1,000. No problem. But my decisions that I make, whether they are good decisions, even something, I always talk about eating a bag of Doritos, but when I eat a bag of Doritos, if I continue that pattern, that is going to shave time off of my life, which is going to take away from my wife, and I have to think about those things. And so there's that more pressure. And, I maybe this is just pressure as a man. I'm sure women feel the same way when they're married as well. But making those decisions, it's just not easy, man, because I have to consider how it's going to affect her. And it's a lot easier for me to have grace for myself, but it's harder to have grace for myself when it affects another person. Same thing, like thinking about Donald Trump and Joe Biden and people in leadership right now, like that police officer that made the decision to shoot, what's her name, Michaela?
I don't exactly remember her name, but I know that there was a lady who had a knife.
Yeah, so, there was a situation where he came onto the scene, and at the time, I'm sure he made the best decision possible. I'm sure he didn't show up and decide, I'm going to make a poor decision, and it affects other people. If he shot the person that had the knife, well, he protects the person that was going to get stabbed. If he decided not to shoot, maybe that person would have stabbed the other and killed them. You don't know. And there's always another consequence in a parallel universe, but when you make a decision, there's always going to be good and bad consequences. There's always going to be the, well, what if statement? Like, what if I had married somebody else? What if we had bought another house? What if I had never moved out of my parents' house? What if I'd moved out sooner? What if I didn't get my car repossessed?
But the problem is that Satan often exists within the what if. And that's how we got to what is currently with Adam and Eve sinning. He presented a what if, and they bought it hook, line, and sinker. And now we're living in a new what is that is corroded by that decision that's brought, I guess, essentially entropy into the world. Like, essentially, things are dying, and they continue to die because of sin. I feel like if we're trying to make a decision, the what ifs only are helpful to some degree. Like, there's only so many things you can account for and plan for. And we talked about this when it came to like establishing a community. There's only so many things you can plan for, and then you just need to jump right into it. So in the same way, when it comes to any decision, I think dwelling on what if, especially if you're getting to a place where you're getting anxious about it, is a good indicator. You need to stop focusing on the what if and just more so focus on the what is. How much money do I have? How much time do I have available? Where is my current levels of emotional energy or physical energy? These are important things that we can look at right now and make a decision. And we can look at the money that we are consistently making to project without any kind of like what ifs of what if we had more money? Well, no, right now you don't. You only have a specific amount of money coming in. Make a decision based off what you do have and what you do know is going to be there next, as long as there's no sudden thing. But even then, like, there's constantly sudden things that could happen. So just dwelling on every sudden thing that could possibly happen is irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, guys, there's so many decisions that I need to make today. Some are bigger than others, you know. And the more decisions I make, the easier it is to make decisions in that same frame of mind. For instance, working on the house. I remember when we first moved in, there were a lot of things that needed to be done. And if I bought this house when I was in my early 20s, it would not have registered, oh, Tim, you can build a retaining wall. Tim, you can redo your deck. Tim, you can paint and you can do this and do that. You can install a new sink. You can do whatever. Like, that would not have been on my radar. But every step that I took to try something new, there are so many times where we have bought things to do a project for the house and I've wasted money on the wrong product. Or we bought the right product and I did it the wrong way and I had to go back and buy more. Or I used too much paint, too little paint, whatever. Everything costs me more than it should because there's always that wiggle room of error that I always engage in, you know? And I think you just have to expect that going forward as you make decisions. You know, you always have to plan a little bit more than you expect. And that way you have that wiggle room of grace to realize, oh, well, I knew I was going to mess up a little bit. But also, I think if you make a decision and you're going in the wrong direction, you have the grace to change your mind. And that's the thing. It's like, if you have 4 or 5 things on the table that you could choose from, just pick one. You know, make the best decision you can in the moment, because much like police officers, much like our president, you know, there is a time frame on everything. You don't have all the time in the world to make every single decision. You know, if you're hungry, you only have a certain amount of time to fulfill your need for food before you start to get hangry, you know? And sometimes you hit it out of the park. This is amazing. This is delicious. And sometimes you get it and you're like, oh, this wasn't great, but I'm full now. But then you can move on to the next decision you need to make. That way you're not paralyzed. But in making big decisions, guys, I think it's really important just to make the best decision that you know how, and just realize, okay, well, the outcome might not be what I want, but I can always change it for the better in the future. There are innumerable decisions you can make in the future to improve your station. You're never going to make a decision and come out on the other side with 100% success, especially if it's a new decision. And I think you just have to be okay with that.
So I think we probably need to wrap it up here, because I think the internet is starting to have some chugging issues. At least I saw there was an interruption on this end, so I don't want to end up like having it just like all the way the rest of the way through. So yeah, I like that. I think it's really important that when it comes to decision making, like, again, accountability is important, because if there is no accountability, it's a lot harder when you need to make those big decisions and what those decisions are supposed to be. And it's a lot easier to make decisions of what's more comfortable and easy, but not actually productive, without accountability. And having, you had mentioned, the part that you mentioned towards the end specifically. Go over that one more time real quick. Sorry. I some of it, whenever I like shift topics, like part of what I was listening to goes into immediate file.
Are you talking about giving yourself space to what was it?
Making perfect decisions.
Planning more resources than you think that you need, so that you have the wiggle room for grace to fail, which you're going to do.
Yeah, that's good. That's that is good to have that, but also at the same time not looking at every what if too, you know, because all the having so many what ifs in your life can really bog you down from making any decision, because there's an infinite amount of things that could go wrong. So like looking at what you have, what you do have, and then giving yourself a little bit of extra, so that way in case there are hiccups, and there very well will be, then you'll have that little bit of extra in case.
Yeah, I think one final thought too, guys, is when you make a decision, you have to keep your eye on the prize. And it's a trite thing to say, but you have to think, okay, well, what is my goal in this decision? Right? What is my goal? And every time you lose your way, go back to that. And if you make a decision, as long as it lines up with that, you can't go wrong. So for instance, if my goal is to love my wife and I get off track in a conversation and I start defending myself, it's like, oh, okay, Tim, throw that in the trash, go back. Your goal is to love your wife. Okay, well, how are you feeling? Okay, I'm pissed off, but how are you feeling? Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm frustrated, but let me go back. Love your wife. Okay, well, I want to communicate to you that I love you. What is my goal? What is my priority? Yeah. So always go back to your priorities.
The end goal is to figure out how your wife is feeling, and that way you can better understand how to interact and work. And so there's more of a focus on the, I guess, net betterment than there is specifically on I need to express something, because you probably do have things you need to express, but you want to do so with love and mercy and grace, which you can only do by having that goal in mind. My goal is ultimately to love my wife well. My goal is to serve God. My goal is to be a provider, whatever. Having that goal in mind definitely helps with the decision making, because if the decision you're going to make doesn't line up with that goal, it's easier to cut that particular decision off and make a better decision and avoid that indecision, because you know what your goals are. I like that. That's good. So, guys, if you've really enjoyed this stream, make sure to like it and to share with your friends, because we really want to help those who are having issues with indecision. A lot of the stuff that's come today is just, I know it's God downloading it onto our hearts. So this is partially what we've learned, but also partially what God's showing us. And I know there's people out there that could really use some help making decisions. So if you know someone, or you have a lot of friends that struggle with indecision, share this with them. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, because we make lots of content like this to help people with whatever it is that they're currently working through in their thoughts, and we find better ways of thinking about it. So we'd love if you could subscribe to us. That way, you'll know when our next videos are coming up, and you can join us and bring questions. If there's anything that we've talked about that doesn't make sense, or we missed a topic that could have been really brought out but we didn't hit at that time, let us know. We've got, the comments here on Facebook. You have the comments on YouTube. And you can also send us, an email at thoughtraid@gmail.com. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching. We broadcast every week on Monday, Friday, and Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be alive again this Friday. See you soon. I can see far away from where I've been. He says I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus, you're alive.